Hi, I'm Adoria Hughes, and I'm here with Mr. Kippy Tate, our Chief Building Official with our Inspections Department. And today we're going to talk about blight and some updates within our City Inspections Department and what our citizens can expect moving forward with our blight project and some upcoming updates, news, information from our Inspections Department. So thank you for joining me.
Sure, thank you. Happy to be here. Good to see you.
Yes, and I didn't know if I got your official title right, but can you say your official title? So
I'm happy to say that. I am the Chief Building Official and the Director of Inspections at the City of Montgomery.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure you wear many other hats as well.
Oh, of course, yes. We have a lot going on in our department. Some new exciting things that have come our way deals with capital projects. Started with the community centers, and then that exploded into other needs that the city has from a capital project. So now we actually have a division within the inspections department for capital projects. So a lot of excitement. If you're ever bored, come on by. We can always make sure you leave with some excitement.
Yes, I'm pretty sure you guys always have your hands filled with different things. And you mentioned community centers, and I know that's been a lot of us lately talking about some of the updates to our current community centers.
Yes.
And possibly some renovations at different community centers. That
Yes.
way the public can utilize these facilities. Can
That's
you
right.
touch on that a little bit?
Oh yeah, we can talk about that as well. But first, let me say this: community centers really mean a lot to me. I grew up here in Montgomery. Ran around as a kid in the streets of Montgomery. It was a different time back then, but the community centers were a place where you really could go in the summertime mainly and just have fun, meet your friends, and just run around and play, swim, and that sort of thing. So now we're about to transform the community centers. In my mind, after talking to the mayor and looking at the vision for the city and the citizens of Montgomery, the community centers now won't be the same block buildings that we ran around that I talked to you about before. They're going to be more transformative from a design perspective. You'll see where they'll be progressive in terms of technology, the programs that go into these centers. So we want the centers actually to become community builders. And quite frankly, at some point we're going to quit calling them community centers and call them something different. But right now, we want to make sure that we get the programs in. We work with Park and Recs. David has done a good job of surveying the needs of the community, surveying what he can support within these community centers. So stay tuned. We've got architects involved. We've got program managers involved. They're actually getting drawings done now. So within the next few weeks, we'll be rolling out our schematic designs. And before we got to this point in the process, we actually end up doing a lot of assessments of the existing buildings, which I gotta tell you are in pretty horrible shape. And we've got to make some decisions how we deal with some of those buildings. But for the most part, I can tell you that the ones that we'll concentrate on in the first phase or tier one are gonna be the ones that bring the biggest bang, the biggest buck to what we can spend our money on.
Well, that sounds really exciting. I know you said maybe switching the name from community centers, maybe enrichment centers, since that's well, people can come use technology and utilize what the community centers have to offer.
Yes.
And I know that that process involves a lot of details, and you mentioned working with different architectures and designing and everything. Another topic that's been buzzing and catching a lot of people's attention is the issue of blight within the community.
Yes.
So I know that we are working to revitalize what's already here, but what about some of those buildings and areas where there are things there, but they're not being utilized? They may not be visually appealing to the public right now.
Well, listen, let me just say this about blight. Blight is ugly. Blight is unsafe. Blight is unhealthy. We see it all over our city now. We have to face the fact that at some point we've got to find ways to prevent blight from happening. But right now we're behind the 8 ball in terms of dealing with what we have now, as she said before. So here's where we are with blight. We talk about blight in 2 categories, one on the residential side, then the other one on the commercial side. The residential side, we've had an active and robust blight program already It's just that in my department, we go through the motions of getting these properties tagged. Once we get them tagged, give the homeowner an opportunity to correct those problems. If they don't happen, then we have to actually take those projects to the city council for approval. From there, we actually get abatement agents in place to help us either demolish or correct the problem. That process takes a while, so I know that a lot of times the citizens say, "Man, why aren't y'all doing anything?" Well, usually these projects are in certain stages of development. On the commercial side, it's a little different. Commercially, we have larger buildings, generally speaking, and there may be environmental issues that are involved with these buildings that we have to take into consideration before we can do anything. So my office has engaged a company called TTL. They are environmental engineers, professional engineers who help guide us through this process to make sure that we follow a lot of the national standards, the federal standards, state and local standards that have to go into place when we deal with these types of projects. Now, that's just the environmental side, and that can be very exhaustive. It just depends on what you find in these buildings and the hazardous materials. You just never know. But that's why TTL helps us through this process. Once we develop a scope of work, that is the assessments have been done, then we roll that out and actually use the scope of works as bid packages to bid to contractors because they're over $50,000. That way we follow the state bid law and then the demolition begins. That's the process. Now there's reality to this, okay? The reality of it, as these projects move through the process, a lot of times you find where there are people who get interested in these projects and from time to time pose, I'll use the word roadblocks until we get things understood and some things satisfied. But at the same time, we have to maintain a good, robust approach so that these buildings that you mentioned earlier, we have some attack plan for them. And I'm using the word attack because you have to attack these projects pretty forcefully because there's a lot of variables involved, and I don't want to get involved in all those details, but if there's no momentum, then these things die, and when they die, they're very hard to pick back up. So we have a plan. Actually, we've completed the first phase of the plan. The second phase has been presented to the city council, the mayor's office. We have some ways to fund these projects. And then that's the other component where you begin to look at the funding source, but the funding source comes what? Restrictions. And the different funding sources do have different restrictions. So navigating our way through all of this to get to the point of where we're bringing the wrecking ball, so to speak, takes time, but we're on track to get some things moving real soon. I mean, really, really soon. So stay tuned, and I'll be happy to come back and update you once you see the dust and the bricks and all these things flying around. We can talk more about that then.
Yes, you mentioned the word having to attack, and I bet it's a lot that goes into it. And I know the public may not understand what's all involved in that process.
Right.
But how could someone find information on whether a building or area, even though it may be in their district or on their side of town, how can they know if that is like a city property, or would the city be able to handle this building or this home, or if this is more so with the county or with the state?
Okay.
So how can they get
Good
involved and find that out?
Good question. And first of all, I would like to say this, and then I'm going to ask you a question. The city of Montgomery does not want your property. So there's a myth out there occasionally that comes up where, the city's wanting to tear this down because they have plans for the property. So this is a conspiracy to get my property. Let me tell you, we don't want your property. So that's just not an issue at this point. What we do want is a safe Montgomery and a good-looking Montgomery. And if properties fall into that category of blight, disrepair, unsafe structure, then we have an obligation to move in. So I'm talking about projects in that category, first of all. Now, if you want to know where they are, who owns it, the details of a parcel or a piece of property in terms of its location and so forth, we have the means to provide that information to the public. So they're welcome to come by our office. We really invite the public into our space because we think that that's the best way to communicate with some of these complicated issues. If for some reason the public cannot make it, we have ways to bring you in via Zoom or via electronic media, obviously emails and so forth. But we think that when you get into property and the sensitive nature of this subject, and particularly if there's a property that we have given you notice on, we'd like to speak with you. We do send out written notices. We do send out the proper notices as it relates to the process. But if you're one of those property owners where you've gotten a notice from us, I would say, first of all, don't assume anything. If you don't already know, call us or come by. We invite you to come by. We have a special room for you, make you feel comfortable, give you some juice and cookies. And but no, we want this to be a comfortable process because, as I said, number one, we want to give you the opportunity to repair your property. So once we give you notice, you have 30 days to come in and say, no, we have a plan to take care of this property. Or if you think that we've done something unfairly, which, let me just say this, there may be times when that does come up where you think we've treated you unfairly. It hurts my heart to think that, but people do walk away with that feeling. You have 30 days to appeal our decision. Okay, so once you get within that 30-day window, let's talk about it. And if there's some misunderstandings, we'll be the first one to clear it up. Now, but the other portion to the process is beyond those 30 days, we actually take all of our decisions about demolition and blight and those sorts of things to the city council. And at that point, the council begins to get involved in how they assess our assessment, and then they'll make a decision. Okay, so at the very end of the agenda, you'll always see the last 2 or 3 items on the agenda that deals with the issues that we bring before the council in terms of demolitions and so forth. So hopefully that answers your question, but I do want you to know, and others who may see this, to know that this is a very general discussion. There are a lot of details involved in all of this that really would make this show so boring if we went into all those. So I just wanted you to know that beyond the discussion here, there's a lot of details, and we can go through all of that with you when you contact us.
Well, I'm glad that you hit on that. Your office and the department is open to the public, because you don't really hear that so often with city departments of, yes, come visit us, come sit, talk with us.
Well, let me just say something about that. You know, being from Montgomery, being born, well, I wasn't born here, but got here when I was 6 years old, and so basically grew up in Montgomery. You know, even I had the perception growing up that, you know, you can't fight and beat city halls. You can't approach the city because they always win. Well, we take just the opposite approach. I mean, very seriously, you're welcome to come in and see us. We will make certain that when you do stop by, that first of all, you're going to be treated with dignity. There may be things that we have to discuss that you just don't understand. And believe me, if you understood the things that we know, we get certifications and all sorts of things. We do a lot of training. So if you got that understanding when you came in the door, then you're a good one. So with all the training and the things that we're responsible for, the health, safety, and welfare of the public, we take that very seriously, and we would like to have an effective way of communicating the issues with you, so that when you do leave, at least you have a general understanding of why. And then we can walk you backwards from there in terms of how we can help you fix it. So we're more prone to help you fix your properties and help you with a plan to get things back on track. Because the other thing about this, Andoria, is this, and this is just the ugly truth. When we demolish properties, guess what happens? You leave a blank spot in the landscape.
Sometimes it's a slab.
Well, most of the time we'll take the slab down, but if in a neighborhood, let's just say, you got a series of houses, and then for 2 blocks there's nothing. So then that invites other possible issues that could be unsavory because you got empty lots. So we would much rather you fix and improve your properties than go through the demolition phase of taking those properties down. That's residentially and commercially. So we all seen where you have debris, mattresses, sofas, and all that kind of stuff on these empty lots. Well, that's unsightly as well. So we much rather not have to tear that house down, but to get it repaired so it contributes back to the fabric of the neighborhood.
Okay. Well, That's a lot of good information to know as well. And how would you say that you all are working to change the narrative of blight, as in where people may think that it's only affecting one side of town or one side of Montgomery, or it's only affecting a few districts here in the city versus others? And you know, people may feel like, oh, well, if blight is only affecting this area and not these areas, maybe it's making the cost of living, cost of buying a home, things like that, more expensive in certain areas here in our city.
Yes, ma'am. And we hear that. We see it. I will say this. We see Montgomery as Montgomery. Our jurisdiction is in Montgomery, so obviously we can't ignore certain areas of town where you have more issues than others. But at the same time, if it's affecting one side of town, then it's affecting Montgomery. The narrative that you mentioned, first of all, one of our goals that we made for fiscal year 23 is to get more involved and engaged in communities. Community meetings, you call us, we'll come. We'll talk to 2 people, 20 people, or 200 people. We go to community meetings, different council persons will ask us to come and speak or answer questions within those communities. We do that and do that very frequently. That was one of our goals, as I said before, to get out of our office too. You're welcome to come to us, but we'll come to you as well. We speak to various groups. There's a certain segment of Montgomery that's retired that wants to know, and they come to us. Matter of fact, I was late in my office 2 days ago. We can expect her about every 2 months, and she wants to know what's going on and what are we doing. So informing the public of what we're doing, informing the public also that this is a two-way street, because blight really goes back to respect for your neighbors. Blight goes back to human behavior. It goes back to quality of life, and that starts with the individual. And quite honestly, when we get involved, it's after the fact. It's after the grass has grown 12 inches. It's after the house is deteriorating over years. You hadn't had a house or a building deteriorate in 2 or 3 days. It takes years. So something that's taken place over that time, that at a point somebody said, that's enough. And usually we respond to complaints. We have so many complaints that we don't just ride around town in some cases looking for your rusty car or looking to pick on you, so to speak, because that's not what we do. We have an office full of complaints that once we go to a complaint, we'll then look around as well. So my point to you is getting information out there about the process, because as I said before, some people think we're not doing anything, but it's the process. But that's on the back end. On the front end, we've got to figure out a way to stop it. We got to figure out a way to get a handle on decreasing the volume of blight, because that's where it begins to destroy neighborhoods. And once you destroy neighborhoods, you begin to destroy communities. And then that cycle is just repetitive. But the other thing too is what blight does that a lot of people don't realize is that it invites investors from out of town or from out of Montgomery, and they don't have the same sentiment about our community. They're just looking at it from a balance sheet perspective and how much money they can make. And then that also brings another element in. This is a free country. You can't stop people. But at the same time, we've got to be able to decrease that sort of attitude and increase the improvement side, the redevelopment side, to get into, in my head, some of the zoning laws that we have on the books and increase and improve those zoning ordinances so that the redevelopment won't take the same path as the blight did in the first place. So there's a myriad of things that I think needs to happen to kind of bring it to a manageable level, but at the same time get the narrative out there that the city is on the move and we have plans in place. The discussion that needs to be had, we have it openly and honestly. One side of town is no different to me than the other side of town when it comes to handling the business. We'll be just as forceful on one side as the other. But I want to dispel this myth. Don't think that we don't get complaints about blight on the east side like we do on the west side. We get signs and people complain about signs being deteriorated and ugliness, if you will. Hoarding, believe it or not, is an issue. and there's some east side hoarding and there's some west side hoarding. So I'm trying to tell you that this is just not a isolated issue on one side of town. It's covers the entire city. But when we get involved with you, you best believe we're coming with everything we have.
I believe that. I definitely believe that. And for someone on the outside, maybe looking into this issue, I know you mentioned that it starts within. It starts within us as citizens and caring for the city and caring for our community. So, what's the process? What does the process look like for someone who may see a blighted building or area, and they think from an entrepreneur standpoint of, I could really see myself revitalizing this area,
Right.
possibly opening up my shop or my business or place of business here, or if it's like a building and they want to invest in it themselves, what does that process look like?
So keep in mind, as I said before, that the property 9 times out of 10 you're talking about is private property. So if you see that building that you described or series of buildings that you described, it may belong to somebody. So initially, if an investor or a person had ideas about how to make improvements in that particular parcel or whatever, you got to start with the ownership of the property. And a lot of times, that's a private citizen or an organization or company or somebody that owns it. So I would start with dealing with the ownership of the parcel at that point. Here again, the myth is that the city is most my property, and that's just the opposite. So you got to start with that level of contact. Sometimes you'll find that the reason we're having the issue is because you can't find the contact. So we dig through tax records and we dig through documents at the probate office that kind of helps us get a clue of where to send these notices to and who are the legal owners based on what's recorded at the probate office. So if we can do it, the citizens can do it because we use the same information that's available to the public. So I would say start in those areas of trying to determine who owns the property and then maybe make your move from there or kind of make some contacts around. But here's what I found though is a lot of times these properties will be vacant for years and then an investor or someone shows up that may have an interest and all of a sudden that property's got the largest price tag on it than anything on the street. So the value goes out of the roof in some cases. But here again, that's part of the free enterprise. So that would be my response to what you just mentioned.
Well, that's good, and I'm glad that you explained that for people who may be watching and they may wonder about something like that for in the future, and they know that it's not solely on the city of Montgomery. It first starts, like you said, with knowing the background of that area and whether it is belonging to the city or if it's a private property as well.
I want to add to what I said too, because there's another elephant in the room, and that elephant, when it comes to blight, deals with property that's owned by the state of Alabama. State of Alabama, I mean, you can look on the list of properties that we have to take before the council, and quite frankly, there's an absorbent amount of properties owned by the state of Alabama. Well, that's in a whole different category. We can take a whole nother session to talk about how that comes about, but the fact of the matter is, it's still in the city of Montgomery. And so we have to care for it as well and do some of the same things that we do with the private citizens. But I don't want the public to think that every single one of these topics that we're talking about is being affected by private citizens. Some of the state owns, and they've acquired it through other means of foreclosure or things of that nature.
Okay. And I know another property here within the city that people have been talking about, I've seen in the media some articles about it, is the Governor's House Hotel. Yes. So what's the city's initiative and move on that
Well, let
property?
me tell you, thank you for asking that question. We're ready to go, been ready to go on the Governor's House. Like I said, the consultants that we have in place and our team, we've been ready to go. And just as soon as we were about to pull the trigger, we got this notice that said stop. And that put us in a legal scenario where we had to pull back until some of the legal matters around that property and the sale of that property are resolved. And if it's resolved amicably, I think that the governor's house may have a different path than demolition. We don't know that yet. City attorney and I have been working together on that particular property, and I guess the best way that I can sum it up is we'll just have to wait and see. But we're ready. If it's time to take it down, we're ready to go.
Well, thank you so much for all this information. Is there anything else you would like to add for anyone else to know? Just not about just blight,
Yes.
just about what inspection
Sure.
does as a whole, and
Sure.
not just also just handling some of the blight issues. Like I said, I know you wear many hats, and the
Well,
inspection
thank you.
department has many hats as well.
Well, thank you so much. Well, first, I'd like to say this, and I sincerely mean this when I say I am truly blessed to represent a fine group of men and women that truly, truly care about this city, and they happen to work in the inspections department. I have to say that, and I don't bite my tongue when I say it. To see the dedication, to see the care, and the tenderness. I'm going to use the word tenderness because when people come to us, they're already tense. Use the word inspections, not just in our world, but in the other world, you get tense. Oh my God, they're about to examine me, or there's something that needs to be examined. Well, I've seen some of the most tender care handled. We had a situation in our office, this is serious, where a state representative came in, I knew who she was, but no one really knew who she was. And I happened to walk in after lunch, and we had a person in our office just handling her just as, didn't even know she was a state representative. The best customer service that you could possibly give to this particular person. And it was, when I told him after the fact who this person was, I didn't know, this is just what we do. So I'm here to brag on my department, to be very honest with you. And we have a few issues to work out, don't think that we don't, but for the most part, I want to say this, they're a fine group of folks. And I'm happy to be the director of the inspections department.
Well, we thank you all so much for what all you guys do for the
Thank you.
city, for the citizens, and I want to thank you so much for joining me to talk about blight, the inspections department,
Thank you.
and your duties and everything that you all do.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being with you today.
Yes, well, thank you so much. I'm Adoria Hughes. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time on Inside City Government.